Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about climate. In this video, I discuss the accuracy of expert climate forecasts. I could spend all day discussing all of the ridiculous predictions made by climate experts, but I've chosen a few highlights for this video. In 1970, Stanford climate expert Paul Ehrlich said Lake Erie would be dead in less than a decade. He also said America will be subject to water rationing by 1974 and food rationing by 1980. He's still very active warning people about global warming. A year earlier, Paul Ehrlich told the United Nations that we needed to poison the food and water supply in Africa. On February 20th, 1969, the New York Times warned that the North Pole would be ice-free within a decade or two, and 3 days later they were worrying about a new ice age. These sort of contradictions don't seem to bother people on the left, or we'll call this doublethink. In the 1970s, many of the leading global warming advocates were worried about a new ice age. Here's one from The Guardian in 1974. New ice age to begin soon, scientific data shows. Threat of a new ice age must now stand alongside nuclear war as a likely source of wholesale death and misery for mankind. In 1975, the Canberra Times declared, "The ice age cometh." In 1970, the Washington Post wrote, "Colder winters herald dawn of a new ice age. Get a good grip on your long johns, cold weather haters. The worst may be yet to come." That's the long-range weather forecast being given out by climatologists, the people who study very long-term world weather trends. The CIA said that the ice age began in 1960 and would starve millions. Now they say that global warming will starve millions. In 1972, the National Science Board said that we were headed into the next glacial age. In 1975, Science News said the ice age was coming, and they had a cover story showing glaciers pushing into New York City. In 1970, the New York Times warned that the Arctic was becoming very frigid and the ice was becoming ominously thicker. In 1974, the BBC and the Canberra Times warned that a new ice age could begin in our lifetime. In 1975, the Chicago Tribune warned that the armadillos were heading south and the ice was right behind it. In 1974, Time magazine warned of a new ice age, and they said it causes drought, record rains, and floods. They blame all of these same things now on global warming. President Obama's science advisor, John Holdren, warned of a new ice age in 1970. He co-authored the paper with Paul Ehrlich, the Stanford guy who wanted to poison Africans. In 1963, the age warned that only 1 in 200 would survive the new ice age. In 1971, NASA's top climate expert warned of a new ice age and said it would be here by the year 2020 or 2030. In 1972, Britain's top climate expert warned of a new ice age. "We are on a definite downhill course for the next 2 centuries," he declared. "The last 20 years of this century will be progressively colder." In 1974, The Guardian warned, "Space satellites show new ice age coming fast." European climatologists said Earth's snow and ice cover increased 12% from 1967 to 1972. This appears to be in keeping with other long-term climatic changes, all of which suggest that after reaching a climax of warmth between 1935 and 1955, world average temperatures are now falling. You might expect that this cooling would be troubling to modern climate scientists, but they've dealt with it by simply erasing it. They've changed the graphs. The blue line shows measured U.S. temperatures, and the red line shows what NOAA reports to the public. The 1930s was actually the hottest decade in the U.S., and the U.S. cooled sharply from 1930 through the 1970s, but they've altered the data to create a fake warming trend. In 1975, the Chicago Tribune warned of a new ice age coming soon. "Brr, new ice age on way." Arctic ice and snowcap has expanded 12%, and for the first time in this century, ships making for Iceland ports have been impeded by drifting ice. They also said that the new ice age was going to drown the coasts, the same thing they say now about global warming. And how did NASA deal with the increasing ice at Iceland ports? Well, that was easy. They simply erased it. The yellow line shows the measured temperatures in Iceland, and the black line shows what they report to the public. They simply cooled the past. As I said at the beginning, I could go on all day with these ridiculous forecasts, but I'm going to jump ahead to the present, to some of the most ridiculous ones going on now. 10 years ago, the Sydney Morning Herald and the Bureau of Meteorology's head of climate analysis warned that Southeast Australia was in a permanent drought. 2 years later, they were completely flooded. Same thing happened in California. Last year, there was endless warnings about permanent drought in California, including from the New York Times and the governor. This was right before their snowiest winter on record. 5 years ago, The Guardian even warned about permanent drought in the UK, about 2 weeks before the whole country was flooded. What these climate scientists are doing has nothing to do with science. It's just complete buffoonery. And in fact, in 2010, the UN IPCC announced the results of their 2014 report, 4 years before they'd even done the study. This is all politics. It has nothing to do with science. Next climate warming report will be dramatically worse, UN, dated November 2010. Its next report, involving contributions from thousands of scientists around the world, is due in 2014. So they knew the conclusions 4 years before they'd done the study. I have thousands and thousands of very similar references, and I could probably make a 24-hour video of all this idiocy. Richard Feynman said, "Science is the belief in the ignorance of the experts, and in no field is that more true than in climate science." Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science for a long time.